Hello and welcome back to the Sex and Healing podcast. I'm your host, Erin, and thank you so much for joining me as we take this wild ride together through the realms of sex and healing. Today's episode is for all of the women who've ever been called too needy. Now, of course, I love the men in my audience as well, and there's a chance that you too have been called too needy, but I definitely see it as a problem that is far larger for my feminine audience than it is for men. But perhaps this is also very supportive if you are in relationship of any sort with someone else who identifies as being needy. Or perhaps you think that they're needy. Basically, for anyone that has anything to do with anyone that's needy, this is for you. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, I'd love if you subscribe so you never miss an episode. We release a new episode every Tuesday. If you're enjoying it, I'd love if you leave a 5-star written review on iTunes or share the episode with someone that you think would value it. So today we're really talking about needs in all of its forms. What are needs, how to understand needs, how to get our needs met, and what to do if you are someone who considers themselves or has any kind of perception of themselves as being too needy. So first of all, what are needs? So we could look back at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is the basic understandings of human needs. And it is a pyramid that at the base of that pyramid has our psychological needs of food, water, warmth, and rest. These are basic survival needs. Just above that, we have the need for safety and security. Beyond those basic needs, as we journey up the pyramid, we come across belongingness and love needs, being intimate relationships and friends, and then our esteem needs, which are prestige and a feeling of accomplishment. So those psychological needs only become important to us once we have the basic needs of safety and psychological needs met. So you can imagine if you didn't have a roof over your head and you didn't have food and water, and that was your primary goal, is to find food and water, intimate relationships are not going to be important to you at that moment in time. It's only when we have these very fundamental needs met that we can then progress into looking at thinking, okay, I need intimate relationships, I need friends, I need family, I need some sense of tribe. Once we have that sense of tribe, then we can look at a sense of accomplishment and prestige and contribution. And then at the very peak of the pyramid becomes our self-fulfillment needs, which is self-actualization and achieving our own potential. So the beautiful thing to realize is that in listening to a podcast like this is that we are some of the very few privileged people on our planet who can actually focus on self-actualization, because we live in a society where so many of our base level needs are met. But that is not the case for, I dare say, the majority of humans on the planet. We truly are privileged to, even be able to have these kind of conversations or to have access to this kind of material. So that's known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then we can move on to 6 primary needs, which Tony Robbins has certainly made very, very well known. And the 6 primary needs, according to Tony Robbins, number 1 is certainty, which is assurance that we can avoid pain and gain pleasure. So a need for certainty, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, and we can all reflect on parts of our lives where we want to know that we have that sense of security through the certainty and the predictability of life. The second primary need is uncertainty, which can be more confusing for people who might think, why on earth do I want uncertainty? Because uncertainty can feel very uncomfortable as well. But uncertainty is also the need for novelty or the need for variety. So that's when we want to try something new, when you want a change. For me, that is a very big one because I love to grow and I actually don't like staying still. So I struggle there a little bit because I know I need more certainty than what I often provide for myself at many times in life, because I'm throwing myself into that uncertainty. Then we have significance, which is each of us needing a significant, the recognition that we're significant, which is also about being unique, being important, being special, or being needed. And for a lot of people who have any kind of ego association with significance, they can often really reject that in themselves or deny that in themselves and not like the fact that we have a need for significance. But From a non-egoic perspective, each of us are significant and each of us are special. But because we're each significant and special, then none of us are significant and special. So the significance that we can seek to find doesn't have to mean that anyone else is less significant because we have that. Or if we're recognizing our own specialness, that doesn't mean that anyone is less special. So it doesn't have to come from that egoic place. We can really look at it as this beautiful, unique nature of humanity and recognize that in our uniqueness and the fact that we've never existed before and will never exist again, that there lays our significance. And then we need connection and love, which is pretty self-explanatory again. And that's a feeling of closeness or union with someone or something. You know, for some people that might be a religious connotation, that connection to the divine, or it might be a family bond, or it might be a romantic bond. Then we have growth, again, another one which I throw myself into, an expansion of capacity, capability, or understanding. So I think growth is part of the fact that we are an organism living on Earth at this time and everything is growing. We live in an ever-expanding universe. And then number 6 is contribution, which is a sense of service and a focus on helping or giving and supporting to others. So those can hold different levels of priority in each of our lives, and that level of priority can change as we continue to grow and evolve and our life circumstances change. So you might not realize that you have a need for certainty because life has always felt pretty certain to you, but then things might happen, this world pandemic might happen, and then you realize that, oh my God, I'm not certain of anything and I'm struggling. So then we can have a look at where we can start to meet that need for certainty a little bit more. So those basically cover everyone. But then we need to start looking at the fact that we are individuals and every one of us is different. And so where does that come into play? Well, that comes into play with our secondary needs. And secondary needs are more so what makes up each of our personalities. So for some people, they have a real need for physical fitness, you know, like their I'm going to say attachment or their desire, their focus on their physique and fitness and sports is just such a prominent part of their personality. And if you take that away, like I'm in quarantine as I'm recording this in Australia, it's day 5 of 14 days of government mandated hotel quarantine. So I'm in a room where I see no other humans. I'm not allowed to open the door to other humans. My window doesn't open. For someone that's in this environment who has a need for physical fitness, who perhaps is a track runner or a long distance runner, and they're in this room where you can't do anything but do laps between the door and the window, you can understand what a strain that would be on getting their needs met. But for me, I also have a need for autonomy and alone time. So actually being in quarantine, I'm getting lots of my needs met and I'm doing really, really, really okay. I'm not struggling in any way. So when I look at my own secondary needs as an example, emotional connection is very high up on that list. I am a very emotionally driven person. So being understood on the level of emotion, being able to express and be heard in that emotion is very important to me. Having other people that really thrive in that emotional realm with me. Then personal growth. So that's what would you call that? A bit of a refinement on the need for growth, but my personal growth, my development, my spiritual growth is very, very important to me. Nature is another one of my needs. I really thrive living in nature. I cannot thrive in a built up, high density living area. And so here in quarantine, I've bought myself beautiful native Australian fresh flowers to bring in that sense of nature. I can see the sky, which is very important to me, being connected to the rhythms of nature, the timings of nature. All of these things allow me to thrive. I have a need for attention, which is one that was not so easy for me to accept about myself because it's something that was shut down in my childhood. My need for attention was not well met or well understood, but I thrive when I get attention. It is something that is a bit neutral for me now. It just is what it is. There's no needs that are better or worse. It's just that I thrive when I get the right amount of attention. I have a need for freedom and autonomy. I can't be told what to do. I have to do things my own way. I'm much better in a leadership position than in a follower position. And I also have a need for pleasure and comfort. So this has been evident in me since I was a child as well. And again, one of those ones that wasn't easy for me to accept, that actually I do need comfort. I really like comfortable things. I need nice quality products. I need, not to lug a heavy backpack full of chemistry textbooks on 3 different buses to get home like I used to in high school. I can't tell you how much I hated that kind of discomfort, not having the freedom and autonomy of being able to get me from A to B easily, and not having to lug these heavy science textbooks. Like, it was ridiculous. I have a need for spirituality. I really, really, really need it in my life, and I need to prioritize it as well. My spiritual connection, again, is the source of so much love and joy and understanding and comfort and guidance in my life. It's a big, big part of my personality. I have the need for romantic relationships. Again, romance. Oh, I'm so romantic. I love romance so much, but that romantic need and expression of myself doesn't just have to come through sexual partners. I get it in my friendships. I even get it from animals. The love and the joy that I get from connecting with other beings can be very romantic and fulfill that need for me. I have a need for service. Hello, podcast. My loyal listeners, thank you for allowing me to fulfill my need for service. I am definitely a service-driven person. I'm a very, very, very generous and giving person at my core. And if I didn't have a place to put that energy and that desire, I would struggle. I also have a need for security and stability. That, again, for me, is kind of tied into the freedom and the autonomy piece, is that I am in charge of my physical environment, and that I really get to choose who comes in and out of my physical environment, that I feel safe and at peace in that physical environment, that I don't ever feel like my safety is being jeopardized in my day-to-day life, that I'm living in a place that is relatively safe and secure. I have a need for beauty. I really love beauty. Oh my God, beauty in all of its forms, beauty in nature, beauty in art, beauty in design, beauty in function, beauty in humans. Brings me so much peace. The visceral sensation that I have in response to beauty is amazing. And then I have a need for achievement, which gets me in trouble a little bit because I am a chronic overachiever, and I place humongous expectations on myself because I know what I'm capable of, but I do absolutely have that need to achieve. So if you want to discover your secondary needs, I would suggest going online and just Googling needs list, and then that will bring up a whole heap of needs. You look under lots and lots of different resources, and then start to identify your personality and what you need. And then beyond that, we then move to the most superficial layer of needs, which are tertiary needs. And these are the needs that we get met in moment-to-moment basis. So they're kind of like, it's been described to me as these little creeks that lead into rivers that lead into large bodies of water. So the large bodies of water are our core primary needs. Then the rivers would be our secondary needs. And then these are the creeks. Everything's feeding in. So in the moment to moment, my need for achievement, that might look like needing to get my to-do list done at work. It might need to look like successfully launching an online course. It might look like overcoming a conflict in my relationship. So I need to overcome that conflict in the relationship. I need to launch that course, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not an ongoing, super important need for me, but it does feed into that need for achievement, which also leads into that primary need for significance. So once we start to come to understand ourselves, we can actually start to recognize where are these needs getting met and where are they not getting met. I have written so many poems about being too needy, too sensitive, too emotional, too spiritual, too deep, believing that I was difficult to love because I was too much, I was too needy. But what I can really see in myself now is that it's not that I was too needy. It was that those needs were unmet. So not only were they unmet, but that I have a high level of need compared to the majority of other people. And that is absolutely okay. Again, this comes down to the fact that we are unique beings on the planet. And there are some people who have very little needs and are very content and complacent in life effortlessly. And then there's others of us, and myself as a great example, as being very deep, very complex, very intricate. And that's often misunderstood as being complicated or difficult or hard to manage by others that don't have the same understanding or access to that kind of depth and complexity. One of the other things that contributes to this idea that we're too needy is also the idea that we're trying to get our needs sourced through someone else, and that person's perception of us is that we're too needy. And that can come down to their inability to meet our need, or it can also come down to the fact that they're not having their needs met. And if any of us are in a state of not having our needs met, then we have very little to give. So when I think about my childhood and the fact that I was a high needs child and that I was a complex and intricate child, which again can be misunderstood as complicated, as difficult, as moody and emotional. The only sources that I had to get my needs met at that time were my parents. And I can guarantee you, my parents were not getting their needs met. They were not happy. They were not living and thriving and living a fulfilled life. This whole conversation about even identifying our needs and having this privilege of being able to learn about ourselves in this way was not a common thing for our parents' generation. They didn't have podcasts to listen to. You couldn't go on the internet and Google things. Really, the only resources I imagine that you would have had the only resources that you would have had at that time is probably going to see a therapist. We're so lucky now to have so much of this information available on the internet, on YouTube, on online courses, on podcasts, that we can learn and evolve ourselves far more easily. So to consider the generation before us being unable to meet our needs is not a blame. It's more an understanding. It's a shame, that's for sure. It's a shame that, that contributed to me having so many misunderstandings about myself, such a low self-esteem and a low self-worth, because it's also really important that we understand the worth of ourselves in order to get our needs met, and that we don't sacrifice our needs, because that again is another very, very common story, is that it's something that's been praised, is that you put others before yourself, and that you fulfilling other people's needs makes you valuable. And at that price of self-sacrifice, the martyrdom that comes with putting other people before yourself. So we really need to understand that as we prioritize our own needs, as we value ourselves to that degree, that we prioritize our needs and we strategize to get our needs met from ourselves and from others, that is actually something that benefits the world around us. That me having a high regard for myself is also having a high regard for others. The ironic thing that I think about in my life is that I've had both a very strong story that I'm not enough, but also that I'm too much. And both of those is essentially just a rejection of who I am. What I'm seeing now is that there's nothing wrong with who I am, that it's a beautiful thing to be so deep and intricate and complex, that the more I have, the more I have to give, is that I'm deep and complex for a reason. And that is here to make an impact in the lives of others. And it's no longer me asking, am I too much? It's me recognizing, are they enough for me? Someone else that looks at me like I'm complicated or I'm difficult or I'm too much of something is more a reflection of their capacity versus mine. And I don't necessarily mean that in an egoic or hierarchical sense, but just a matter of fact, is their capacity different from mine? If I have a larger volume, then yes, I'm going to look big or too much for someone with a lesser capacity or lesser volume. So what to do if we're a too much woman? This is something I'm going to go into in much more depth, but what are we going to do if we believe that we're too needy? The most important thing we need to do is A, identify what our needs are, and B, start to strategize to get those needs met. So we need to be able to meet those needs for ourselves and put things into place and prioritize ourselves enough to get those needs met, because that's what the subconscious needs to. The subconscious is the needs machine. That's where our needs live. And the subconscious is constantly, all it's trying to do is get its needs met. Every decision it makes, every action it takes is all trying to get the needs met. So if we're able to meet our own needs, then the subconscious is able to recognize that input of need. If you don't meet that for yourself at all, then even if someone was trying to present it to you, the subconscious won't accept it. So meeting our own need is pivotal, but we are tribe-based beings. It's very natural and healthy to create dependent relationships, to create interdependency with dependable people who can meet that need for you. Again, codependency, the unhealthy attachment to others to get our needs met, is a lower consciousness aspect of what I'm talking about, but there's a higher level consciousness in the dependency, in the relating on one another, in having dependable people around you. But again, this becomes problematic if we put all of that need on one other person. That's when it becomes codependent. If you don't meet that need for me, then I suffer. So it's something that I mentioned in an earlier podcast, being bi, sub, poly, and in love. And I talked about the strategy that my ex-partner and I had called creating a bullpen. And so a bullpen comes from baseball, where the team would have 2 players per position, except for the pitcher. And because the pitcher is a highly specialized and demanding role, they would have 20 players on the team. And that was called the bullpen. So when we can recognize that we are specialized and demanding in our needs, then we need to have numerous sources to create an influx of ways for our needs to get met, where we're not depending on one. Because if that one person is unable to meet that need for some reason, then we suffer. So it's really important to build up a wide circle of strategies, a wide circle of friends, including lovers and family and therapists and pets and all these different resources, teams and clubs and work colleagues, where this idea of meeting needs and being willing to meet needs for each other and prioritizing getting our own needs met becomes a very common part of our relationship and a healthy part of our relationship, that we all take independent responsibility for it, but we also understand the importance of being able to meet those needs for others. If we outsource everything, then we place ourselves in a position of suffering. If we're able to take ownership for it and create our own ways to get our needs met, then we put ourselves in a position where we're thriving regularly. So what to do in relationships then when we need to get our needs met and they're not getting met at the moment is, number one, is not to come from that place of unmet need, because that becomes a very painful and emotionally charged place. And if we're communicating from that place, the likelihood is that we'll push people further away rather than drawing them in, because that can come with blame. It can come with critique. It can come with an attachment to the outcome, like, you must do this for me. And that's not a healthy relating environment. So we need to make sure that if we're in that place of pain, that we have emotional strategies in place, and we can maybe offload to a friend or journal or do whatever we need to do to be able to come from a more neutral place. And that's the difference between advocating for our needs and being able to speak up for our needs versus being needy. To be able to advocate for our needs is to be able to express it with a high level of self-worth and love and respect for ourselves and love and respect for the other one. And without that attachment to the outcome, to be okay with our partner being okay with our partner potentially saying, I'm unable to meet that need for you, or I can't meet that need completely, or I'm not available for that right now. But what I would suggest also is to then create an alternative. It's like, I'm not able to meet that need for you, but what I can offer is this. Or I'm under the gun with work right now and I don't have the emotional capacity to have these kind of conversations. But at the end of this 4 weeks, things will be different and I'll be able to prioritize this again. Or something along those lines. Or it might be the recognition that I'm never actually going to be able to meet that emotional need for you because I just don't understand emotions in the same way. And then that gives us the sovereignty and the empowerment to say, okay, do I want to be in this relationship? So one of the things that we can do is have multiple relationships. They don't have to be multiple sexual relationships, but they may be, is that we can create this network of people where we can turn to one partner or lover or friend who is really able to care for our emotional self. And we can turn to another who is really able to care for our sexual self. And we can turn to another who is really capable of providing us with safety and security and stability. And we can turn to another who is really able to care for us intellectually. This is that concept of, a tribe where we're not alone and we're not codependent, that we have this beautiful network of people, and we can let go of this idea that we're too needy, because we are beautiful and unique and amazing as we are. And I really, my intention with this podcast is that you can really feel me, is that we're having an intimate conversation just between me and you, and that I can feel you, and that you're being heard in response, and that you're hearing me as well. And so I just really, my heart, it makes me feel quite emotional. I feel such a depth of compassion for anyone who has ever had the message that they're too needy, that there's something wrong with them for having needs. And I just want you to feel my love, my compassion, and my understanding, and that you feel me honoring and recognizing you exactly as you are, for who you are, in all of your depth and all of your complexity, and in all the ways that you've ever been misunderstood for being who you are. I want you to know that it's okay. You are okay, and you are enough, and you are amazing, and you have a beautiful thing to contribute and to give to this world with your beingness, with your uniqueness. And all of us have had experiences in life that are adverse, that are unpleasant, that have been full of suffering and pain and trauma. And we are the privileged ones to be here and having these conversations, and to be able to focus on our self-actualization, and to be able to identify our needs and strategize to get our needs met, and to really thrive. And from that place, make a greater contribution to humanity because of that. So in summary, my loves, you are not too needy, but you may currently have unmet needs. Your job is to identify those needs and strategize how you can get your own needs met, and how you can ask others to also contribute to you getting your needs met. I would also encourage you to identify the needs of others and contribute to meeting the needs of others where you can. I'd really encourage the healthy communication of these things, and not to outsource entirely. Create yourself a bullpen of people that love to help you get your needs met. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this episode, my loves. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. Come and find me on Instagram, share the love. Let me know your takeaways, what you loved, what triggered you, what questions you have. I want to know it all. Make sure you subscribe and you share this episode. And until next time, laugh loud and fuck louder.